Hello, folks, for another episode of the Backmarkers F1 Show. Still with our audio-only podcast for now. Like we mentioned last week, only a temporary thing for probably only one more podcast, as Shaker's almost back. We're recording in a different location, so it's just easier for us to do it this way for these couple episodes. So almost back to our normal, regularly scheduled programming, but the show must go on, and we're here to preview the French Grand Prix after a not-so-quiet last couple of weeks since the Canadian Grand Prix. Still a lot of events unfolding from that penalty incident.
Yeah, usually you have, at least it's a little quiet between races, but no, Ferrari have sent a formal investigation. Is that what it's called?
They sent the FBI.
They sent the FBI to the FIA. Yeah. About the whole Vettel thing, and a lot of you didn't agree with us, at least on our last video, about our take, and that we thought there shouldn't be a penalty. A lot of you thought there should be a penalty. So obviously that you guys have your opinion, and you guys made some very good points in that reasoning.
Well.
We personally, I still side with the drivers, with Weber, not Weber, sorry, with DiResta, and all them leaning towards Vettel and having that not a penalty. The commentators, all the professionals. So that's what they were saying, but we can agree to disagree.
Yeah, I must say I was surprised. I guess we don't have any Italian listeners.
I guess not. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it was different because on Twitter you had sort of unanimous people sort of agreeing with what we were saying, and then in the comment section it was completely the other way. But I would agree with you. I think I'm even more so on the side of Vettel and the drivers after looking at the incident. 2 weeks ago
right.
now. Just looking at all the different angles and hearing some things from the drivers. And I know some of the people were saying, you should go watch like Jolyon Palmer's analysis because he's like the new analyzer for Formula One.
Yeah, he's got that post. It's too long. It's like 16 minutes. I don't listen to Jolyon Palmer for that long.
Yeah, I mean, I watched most of it, and it didn't really change my opinion.
Right.
I think interesting to note is that most of the drivers, even Lewis Hamilton himself, said that he would do the same thing. So I think that's interesting to say for the people who are saying, well, Vettel should have done this or he should have done that.
Right.
I mean, everybody would have done the exact same thing. So why are we expecting Vettel to do something drastically, amazingly different, right?
I don't think anything's going to come out of this investigation, though.
No, I don't think so.
Ferrari requested. I think it's going to stay the same. Hamilton will keep the win. Vettel will stay second, and we'll move on to France, hopefully drama-free.
Yeah, and just before we get to the right to review, my final thoughts.
That's what I was looking for.
Right to review. Yeah, it's the official language. Like Vettel was saying, everybody's like a lawyer now.
Yeah.
In today's era. People are saying, check what Palmer is saying stuff. I would also say go check what Mika Hakkinen was saying on the incident. And with all due respect to Jolyon Palmer, I mean, he's got 1,000 times more F1 experience than either of us will ever have.
100%. He's a true professional.
And I'm not discrediting him, and I'm not saying that he's wrong. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I would rather listen to the opinion of a two-time world champion and a guy in Mika Hakkinen who battled Michael Schumacher when Schumacher was at his very best. And what he said about the incident, I'll pull up the article. I won't read the whole thing because it is a bit lengthy, and he does have a podcast out, which I recommend everybody listen to. It's very good. And he brought up some things that we missed, and I think a lot of people missed, and I think this might maybe kind of give you a different light. And he was talking about the track characteristics.
Right.
And one of the things about the turn 3 and 4 is what he was saying right here is that it drops downhill. You go right to left into turn 4.
It's off camber.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Off camber, and it's fast. And like he's saying in this article, the circuit is narrow. I mean, it is a street circuit. It's a temporary street circuit.
Yeah.
But you've got walls that are very close, similar to Monaco. And all of this is happening in a split second. And he goes on to talk about how hot the tires are. It's basically molten rubber. So when you go over things like grass or gravel, and when you go offline, you're picking up all the dirty things, and it's sticking to your tires. So again, I won't read the whole article, but in this article, he basically talks about that Vettel, his main priority was get back to the racing line where the track was cleaner, where the grip was. And his main priority was to also stay ahead of Hamilton because he's a world champion. He's a racer. And he said the same thing. He would have done the exact same situation. And at the end of the day, these two are racing. And in his podcast, he went on to talk about things like if him and Schumacher would be racing in today's era, they'd get race bans. Because, I mean, Michael was known for that, to be, you can call him, I guess, a dirty driver, but just he would...
Strategic, let's call it.
He would pull off some moves that would piss off a lot of drivers. I mean, ask David Coulthard, ask Juan Pablo Montoya. Nowadays, he'd get a race ban for sure, because apparently nowadays you can't touch wheels.
So here's two things going toward this. One, I'll start off with why Julian Palmer's analysis is different than Mika Häkkinen's. And I think it has to do a lot with what we saw with same scenario with maybe some of the comments and what we saw from the race professionals. And that is old school versus new school. Old school, a little more dirtier, a little more kind of rough and rowdy, wheels banging. That's kind of how Martin Brundle described it in the commentary box as well during the race, was this is old school, let them race.
Right.
Like maybe I'm just old. I think he said maybe I'm just old school, but let them race. This is what racing is all about. Where Julian Palmer, maybe a little bit more of a new school driver, sees this from a coming up as a newer F1 driver, not seeing those battles back in the past and say, no, this is illegal, right down by the rules, to the law. So I think that's where we're seeing the discrepancies of opinions is old school versus new school. To the second point, if this happens this week in France, let's say this didn't happen in Canada, but this does happen in France, Vettel would, I think, 100% deserve the penalty because there's so much more runoff in France. You can gain more of an advantage, one. Two, I mean, you have a lot more room to correct yourself. You can go to the inside line of the track and make sure that you don't cut Hamilton off because the track is much larger.
Right.
Obviously, the scenario wouldn't be the same because there's no grass. He's not sliding through the grass. All that scenario. Let's ignore the grass in an asphalt scenario. The whole point is Montreal is a lot narrower. There's not much room for error. And him sliding back on the track in front of Hamilton in Montreal, probably if it was the same distance in France, would have only put him probably 2 car lengths the other side of Hamilton. He would have been, two car lengths on the inside, or 2 car widths, I should say, on the inside of Hamilton, and Hamilton would have blown by. So if he did come up against Hamilton, in front of Hamilton in France, I'd say 100% that's a penalty. But with no room in Montreal, I would say there's nowhere for him to go, no. I might get roasted in that for the comments. It'd be like, well, it's the same.
No,
I don't know, but that's just my opinion.
I think it's a good point because you have to take into consideration all the characteristics and all the factors.
Yeah.
Track conditions, what point of the race they're in, like everything. And I think that's a good point because Paul Ricard is known for massive runoffs.
Huge.
And all asphalt.
We saw that in turn on lap 1 last year. Half the cars didn't even go on the track.
We'll probably see it again.
Yeah.
Most likely. So, no, I think that's a good point because, the same thing in Monaco too.
Yeah.
Some people think that maybe Max Verstappen should have gotten a penalty for his overtake move on Hamilton, which is, I think, ludicrous. And that was kind of my point is like, when did we get so soft when we can't even bang wheels anymore or race? I mean, that's the whole point. So my overwhelming point was just like, if that's a move that gets penalized, where's the racing going to happen?
I encourage some people who are against contact and all that, or at least a little bit of rubbing wheels, to go watch a NASCAR race.
Right.
There's a road race this week in NASCAR. They're at Sonoma, California. It's a fantastic racetrack, awesome racetrack, and there's tons of beating banging each other into the corners. I would really recommend you watch that race. It's on Sunday. It's 2:30 Eastern time. So if you're in England, it's 7:30 at night. Whatever, have your supper and sit down and watch the NASCAR race. It's gonna be a very entertaining race. That race is always so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a bit different. Obviously, stock cars, but
I know, but
when we look at IndyCar too, I mean, IndyCar is another open wheel series, and they have contact all the time.
Yeah.
And side by side, wheel to wheel racing. So, as fans, obviously, we all have our favorites, and when we tried to analyze this incident, we tried to do it down the middle. Pretty biased. Like we took one side of it for sure, but I think that I
think we understand the other side of what other people are saying.
Oh, for sure, and that kind of frustrated me too when people were saying that Vettel should have done this or he should have done that. But as soon as you said maybe Hamilton should have gone to the left, they're like, oh no, you're crazy. Well, how do you expect Vettel to do all that and then criticize someone for saying that Hamilton should have gone to the left. The fact of the matter is that Hamilton couldn't go to the left because he committed to the racing line.
Yeah, it would have been a crash.
Yeah, and not only that, but what Hakkinen was talking about, the circuit naturally takes you to the right.
Yeah.
So he couldn't. I mean, he made the decision to go for it.
Yeah.
So again, we won't get too much into it again because we already covered it. But this was still a big talking point, and a lot of people were still frustrated, rightfully so, with the race and sort of the situation. And it's not necessarily. I mean, the stewards made their decision. I think it's more of the sport and the rules itself need a review, and that's something that Hakkinen talked about too. He said that it should have been left till after the race, where everybody could have gathered evidence and talk with the drivers and then make a decision.
And that's what happened when Lewis lost his race. Everyone got together after the race.
This was 2008 you were talking about?
Yeah. Probably would have been the better scenario there.
Yeah, exactly. And, I would almost suggest something. Instead of a 5-second penalty, why not give Vettel a 5-point penalty after the race if he's found guilty? Yeah. And he gets 20 points, Hamilton gets 18, and that's it. He still wins the race, but championship is still... he's penalized if you had to give a penalty.
Yeah, it's an idea. I don't know how much the teams would be in favor of that, though, because if you're a Mercedes at that point, you're like, well, no, I want 25 points. I'm losing 7 points if you're Mercedes.
Right.
So.
But then again...
It'd work in your scenario, but it also wouldn't work if it happened against you. So it's one. I don't know. Maybe the teams wouldn't be.
Depends what side.
Depends what side on the argument you're on.
Exactly, and that was the other thing too about they said Vettel gained an advantage. I totally disagree with that. I don't think he gained an advantage at all.
I don't think he gained an advantage. He ended up losing time.
Yeah, exactly. And the people that suggested that Vettel should have given the position to Hamilton never overtook him. This isn't like Vettel was in second place, went off the grass to overtake the Paul Ricard scenario that you're talking about. He not only, and I agree, he lost the advantage, and
he made the mistake. Yes, everyone can see that Vettel made the mistake. He tried to correct the mistake the best he could. It's a small racetrack, and that's one great thing about the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. It's a small racetrack. It's a classic racetrack. Drivers love it.
Yeah, and one thing we didn't mention in our review is what a shame that it happened in a circuit named after Gilles Villeneuve.
Yeah.
He'd probably be rolling in his grave seeing a penalty call like that, considering how he raced in his day. And much to, I think, the disappointment of a lot of people that are sort of old schoolers. I guess maybe you can count us in that bracket as well. But so anyways, we already talked a little bit too much about this incident.
Yeah, let's get into France, because France will be very interesting, obviously, with this carrying over, but there's a lot of other things going around in F1 right now.
Yeah. And just quickly, just to wrap up, so Ferrari has launched the right to review. So you can really only launch this review if you're presenting new and significant evidence. So maybe Ferrari has something that we don't, whether that's their own telemetry, possibly maybe other camera angles. So, but like Tyler mentioned, I mean, nothing can really happen at this point. It can't really be overturned.
Yeah, they're not going to be like, oh, just kidding, Vettel wins now a week later.
Yeah,
2 weeks later.
I think that there needs to be enough evidence for them to have a review and for them to meet together, because the FIA has to meet.
What the most likely scenario is Vettel will get his points back on his super license.
Yeah, I think that would probably be. I think he got deducted 1 or 2 points.
I thought it was 3.
Was it 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might have been. So yeah, that would probably be one of the most scenarios. And just in this last part here, last season Williams requested a right of review, just as an example. Against the stewards in Azerbaijan to award Sergei Sorokin a grid penalty for the Spanish Grand Prix. And so, like I mentioned before, a panel has to get together, and they reconvened via teleconference ahead of the Barcelona race to hear Williams' evidence, but they threw the case out because they didn't think it was worth a review. So this could happen again with the Ferrari thing. So that's just the final thing on that. So I'm sure we'll hear some of that this weekend. But anyways, that was 2 weeks ago. So let's move on to the Circuit Paul Ricard for round 8 of the championship. And this is eventually our race preview for the French Grand Prix.
Yeah, it is now.
Yeah. And we're back in France after, I mean, we returned for the first time last year in about 10 years. And the French Grand Prix has sort of always seen different tracks, the one in Dijon or the one at Magny-Cours. So there's been a lot of different French circuits used.
I like this one, though. I like Paul Ricard. It's got a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and last year when we did our preview, I really didn't know anything about this track, so it was difficult. But when F1 2018 came out and this track was on there as the new track, you get to kind of learn it yourself a little bit as a gamer. And, I actually think that playing the video game helps you really understand circuits and helps you understand how to drive them. I mean, not saying that I'm anywhere near a competent
Not
F1
at-
driver,
not at
but
all.
it helps you understand.
I'd
sort
be a
of-
minute over Valtteri's lap record.
Yeah, luckily, maybe. But I agree. It is a test track, even though it hasn't been on the F1 calendar for a while, since 2018. A lot of teams have been using this. Pirelli has been using this as a main tire testing track, and it's kind of similar like Barcelona. You got a lot of mix of high, low speed, and medium speed corners, and the teams know it very well. And they don't do preseason testing here, but they do a lot of in-season tests at Paul Ricard, and a lot of the young drivers as well have done many tests here with some of their bigger teams. So it is a good track, and like Tyler mentioned earlier, runoff areas is one of the main things that dominate this track.
Yeah.
And we saw last year in turn 1, also leading into turn 2 and turn 3, a lot of drivers just bail out, especially after the contact between Vettel and Bottas. And I think there's a very good likelihood of us seeing something like that again on lap 1.
Oh, 100%. 100% is going to happen. You have 20 cars racing to this tight turn 1, and with all the runoff areas, just like automatically your eye's going to go accident there, runoff area, see you later.
Yeah.
It's just a natural thing that happens. Where if there's a wall there, you're like, oh crap, where am I going to go?
You got to back off.
Runoff area, you're like, see you later, I'm out of here. So, I mean, we could see Roman Grosjean take the lead.
Can he keep it, though?
Through the
That's
runoff
question.
area.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like he'd be getting a penalty for that. But
yeah. He could just take one of the other 150 different track layouts there are and say that, hey, I was on the track.
I was on the track, yeah, exactly. It's always an exciting... I really like this racetrack. I liked the race last year. I thought it was a good race. The circuit, I enjoy the circuit. It kind of reminds me a little bit of... Like, the backstretch reminds me of Le Mans, which is, I don't know, I guess just a classic kind of feeling you get. You're like, oh, they should race at Le Mans. Anyways.
Shout out to Fernando Alonso, 2-time Le Mans.
That's correct.
And WEC champion now.
Good job for Fernando.
Feel bad for the number 7 car, though.
Jeez. Yeah, I know. Why don't they race at Le Mans? Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
They have it,
reliability, probably. It's a long circuit.
Yeah, it is a long circuit. But, I mean, the 24 hours just happened there. Just continue the festivities next week.
Hey,
French
I'd
Grand
be down.
Prix.
Let's go back to the Nürburgring Nordschleife, too. The full.
No, not the full one. No, that's a bad idea.
Do it.
But it should be a fun race. Story points coming into this one. I know, obviously, it's Renault's home race. They're bringing massive upgrades to this race, like monumental upgrades. And usually, you kind of put on one upgrade to see if it works, and if it doesn't work, you take it off, kind of thing. I think they're putting 3, 4, 5 upgrades on their car. So to figure out which one worked and which one didn't work will be very hard for Renault.
Mm-hmm.
But they're supposed to be getting this massive boost, and they're kind of saving their upgrades for France for this race. And are we going to see all of a sudden a half-second increase of time for Renault? I mean, that's a lot of time to try and make up, but you have to think that's what they'd be trying to expect to be with Red Bull.
I'd be surprised if it was that large.
Yeah.
I think they'll maybe gain a few tenths here and there, but they had this race circled on their calendar, especially with the way their season started.
Yeah.
And when you come to a home race, especially a big manufacturer like Renault, there's a lot of pressure in terms of the CEOs of Renault and the motor company coming down on the Formula One side of things, because they increased their budget for this year and they're not getting the results. So, these CEOs and these number crunchers are looking at guys like Cyril Abiteboul and saying, hey, what's going on here? I mean, you've barely finished, they've DNF'd in 3 or 4 races this season already. And you brought in Daniel Ricciardo. You gave him a nice, healthy paycheck, too, as well. So they've been saving these upgrades, I think, for this circuit. I think Canada, for them, was a huge boost for them.
And they're going to be enjoying the straight line speed at Paul Ricard, too.
Yeah.
Which is weird, because usually we see Renault, their chassis is great, and they kind of lose the mark in engine performance. It's the opposite this year. Their engine is great, but the chassis is not the greatest.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe not having to supply to Red Bull has something to do with that.
Maybe, yeah.
Only going to McLaren, even though they're sort of battling McLaren this season for best of the rest, which is interesting because they're both Renault engines. But yeah, I think that after Canada, whether they expected that or not, was a huge boost to see Daniel Ricciardo battling Mercedes and holding him off for a few laps. must have gave them a good confidence booster.
Mhm.
And now they come to Paul Ricard, and yeah, good point mentioning the long straights. If that Renault power is going to continue to be good, that's nice at a track like this. And one of the things that Nico Hülkenberg talked about in one of his interviews was saying that a lot of their problems sort of mask the fact that their car has worked well at every circuit. And when you look at the Bahrain, for example, I mean, they left a big double points finish on the table with the double DNF.
Yeah.
So had they finished the race in that situation, they'd be fourth right now, and we probably wouldn't be talking about their issues as much, because with the double points finish in Canada, bumped them up right to the battle for the best of the rest. I think they're fifth now.
Yeah, I think so.
In the constructor standings. So for Renault, you're now going into your home race. There's a lot of pressure. So now is the time to bring upgrades. So yeah, just quickly checking. They're 2 points behind McLaren for fourth in the Constructors' Championship. So maybe the issues that Renault has sort of masked their potential, and maybe their car is working at a lot of these circuits. It's just reliability, poor qualifying. Their qualifying trim hasn't been great, that's for sure. So yeah, I'm hoping for good things for Renault at their home race now.
Yeah, me too. Hopefully everything's reliable though.
Yeah, seriously.
I know them and Red Bull have those little kind of nose flap wings like we saw on the old Toyotas, those kind of winglets, the air, I guess.
Yeah.
But
there's one behind you right there. The people can't see, but there's
see
an old school Toyota
that
on
is
the wall.
exactly what I'm talking about. Is that little like winglet?
Yeah.
Well,
When we head back to our old,
it's not on that one actually.
Our old studio location, we'll put that poster up.
Yeah. But we'll see if that improves any performance. Red Bull has it on. They kind of a different style of it. Little things like that. We'll see on Thursday. On Friday. Thursday. It's not Monaco. We'll see on Friday the changes. I'm sure everyone will be kind of looking at, knowing that this upgrade's happening, be analyzing the Renault car pretty heavily. There'll be lots of pictures and trying to figure out what exactly has changed on the look of the car and what they've added. So
yeah,
be very interesting, and it's a huge race for them to try, like you said, get up to that fourth position. McLaren's doing very well right now. Racing Point's had a little resurgence. They look like they could challenge as well, especially at this track with their speed. So it'll be a little interesting. Alpha's kind of fallen out of the circle now.
Yeah, they have.
After a strong start of the season, they've really fallen off the cliff.
Yeah, and they're another one that they're scratching their heads a little bit in exactly what's going wrong, and
because they look like that's the number 4 car right there, Alpha.
It is. I predicted that. I thought they would get some podiums, but that's not looking likely at this point.
Yeah.
Although there's still a lot of races to go, but yeah, those teams like you mentioned, Racing Point. For Lance Stroll, especially, one of the things that we did overlook in our review, because
great race.
Yeah, he had probably one of his best races of his career.
Yeah,
and a lot of his overtakes didn't get shown on the main feed of the broadcast, but looking at the highlights afterwards, he had a great overtake on his teammate at the hairpin, and just managed the tires really well. Yeah. And like I said, he was 18th, got bumped up one place because of the grid penalties.
It was a mature drive from him.
Yeah,
which it was like we haven't seen that much from Lance Stroll so far in his career. Baku was probably the main last one we saw. This one was very mature of him. He did a fantastic job.
Yeah, no, and a mega job too. And like you said before, with Racing Point, they were kind of in a hole a little bit heading into that weekend. And so hopefully that's a turning point for them going forward. They kind of struggled at this track last year. They had a double DNF that was due to some contact as well. But it's a new track for a lot of these drivers. So, Perez was saying he did a lot of simulator work ahead of this race, because there's a lot of racing lines you could take into a lot of these corners. So it's about finding which is the fastest one, which is the most efficient
which is the most comfortable for you, too.
Exactly.
There might be one that's a tenth faster, but if you can't go through it comfortably, you maybe lose 2 tenths on it, where you can save those 2 tenths going on another line you're more comfortable with.
Yeah. And, looking at the track characteristics, when we look at the circuit map, last year was super confusing to see where the actual circuit was because of all the lines and everything. Yeah. But now, we're a bit more familiar with the track. It's one of the longer tracks on the calendar at 5.8 kilometers. And in terms of tire stress, it's one of the highest on the season as well. There's a lot of loads and a lot of energy going into the tires.
And that all the paint lines you see on the side, that's very grippy paint as well. So if you go off there, it kind of hurts your tire performance as well, because it's a abrasive surface. It's abrasive paint to try and help slow the cars down if there's a crash. But obviously, even if you're turning, it's going to still hurt the tires a little bit more. So it's an interesting runoff area as well. So obviously it punishes you for going off track.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what you want.
And it helps slow you down too in an accident. We saw with Ericsson and Grosjean last year. They've actually found that asphalt does a pretty good job in terms of slowing the car down, even
That's
better
the best
than
one.
grass and gravel.
Yeah, well, grass is just slippery, and gravel, it's grooved, so you really only get like the top layer moves, but
Yeah, especially when you hit the brakes in an accident, it will help slow you down.
Chain Bear F1 did a great video on this, and I recommend you checking out. Just Google F1 Chain Bear. I don't know, you'll see in it. Anyways, great video on different sort of runoff areas, and he does highlight Paul Ricard.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so just getting back to the tires, Pirelli have selected the C2, C3, and C4s, so sort of one step down from Canada, because the tire. Oh, that's a little slow there with our internet, but because the tire wear and sort of the track is abrasive, you do need some tires that are going to last you a bit longer. It seems like the one stop will be the one to decide it this year.
Yeah.
Similar to how it was last year, but we have safety cars and certain things like that that you do need to take into account. And I was reading from Pirelli also that turn 13 at this track, it has the second highest energy load behind China turn 1, 2, 3.
Oh, really?
That combination. Which I found, it was a little bit interesting to me, because I thought it might be 10 going into 11 and 12, that sort of swooping double right-hander, because it's so high speed. And the drivers were saying that that's a really fun part of the track, just because of the high G load going into the car. But apparently, 13 is the one just before that little sort of, not necessarily, almost mini hairpin of 14 and 15 before finishing your lap. That's one of the higher energy load turns in the calendar. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, very cool to know. And it's nice of Pirelli to throw that out there and give us a little bit of an idea of what they look at a racetrack as the hardest part on the tires. And, it'd be cool if they give us why they're giving us those selections for tires as well throughout the race, or before the race, and why they decided to go with the C2, 3, and 4 rather than the C3, 4, and 5, let's say, or the C1, 2, 3. It'd be nice for them to release that.
Yeah, and this is where one of the races they introduced the thinner tire treads was Paul Ricard last year, and obviously that's what they've gone with for the whole season in terms of the regulation in 2019. In terms of the tire selections, most of the top teams are actually fairly identical. Just looking at the selections here, when I go from Hamilton, Bottas, Vettel, and Leclerc, all have one set of the C2s, 3 sets of the C3s, and then 9 sets of the red soft C4s. So basically, Ferrari and Mercedes going with the same sets. Red Bull, Verstappen, he's going with an extra set of the C3s and one less set of the red C4s. But for the majority of the teams, they've gone with only one set of the C2. Daniel Ricciardo has taken 2 sets. The likes of Perez and Stroll have taken 2 sets of the white C2. And when we go down farther in the grid, Giovinazzi, Kvyat, Albon, they've all taken 10 sets of the C4 soft.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so they've gone a little bit more aggressive with that decision. But it'll be interesting to see what the strategy is, because weather can play a factor as well, although the weather forecast looks fairly decent for this weekend. It is the south of France.
That's true. That is a nice part of France.
And it's always sort of hit or miss. You've got the ocean that's right there. And last year, as the race finished, basically the rain came. There was rain threatening the qualifying session last year, so that's always sort of unpredictable. And it's typically pretty hot at this time of the year, which comes into play again for the tires. And getting back to the track, it's interesting to note that the majority of this circuit has been resurfaced from last season. So there's new asphalt for about a third of the track. So the good part of the track has been resurfaced, which is going to see, I don't know how accurate their numbers are going to be in terms of the new track surface, but that's going to be interesting to see how the strategy plays out with that new asphalt there. And when I look at this circuit, we can kind of talk a little bit about the favorites going into this race.
Le Castellet, France. Beautiful all weekend.
Mhm.
25 Friday, 26 Saturday, 27 degrees Celsius on Sunday, sunny parts of clouds.
Yeah,
It'll
so it should be
race
pretty hot.
weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. Getting into which teams look like they're going to be strong at this track. Obviously, Mercedes. They're going to be strong at every track this season. But it's interesting because when we were doing our Canada preview, I said that the next 3 races for Ferrari are most likely going to be their best chances to win their first Grand Prix.
Right.
Should have happened in Canada, obviously. France is another track. I think France won't be as strong for Ferrari, but I think that they will have a chance to possibly beat Mercedes. They are bringing small evolutions to their car in France. Now, if you're a Ferrari fan, don't get too excited because this won't be a massive overhaul in terms of changing their
small
fundamental
evolutions.
Yeah, so whether it could be little things in the front wing or the rear wing.
It might honestly be that those kind of T-wings that we saw. Renault, geez, that was tough to figure out. Renault and Red Bull come out with in Canada.
Yeah, because it's a kind of an interesting track for setup because you've got, really looking at the track, you've got 3 long straights if you count the swooping right-handers of 10 and 11, and then obviously the 2 straights in Sector 1 and then Sector 2. You got a little short one before you go down to the run into Turn 4 and 5, but it's not really that big of a straight. So when I look at Ferrari's chances, I think that they could have a really strong end to the Sector 1. I think Sector 2 is probably going to be their best sector in terms of where they can make up the most time in qualifying. Because when you look at the exit of 6 and 7, you really only have the small little chicane of turn 8 and 9 where it's a low-speed corner, but then the rest of it is essentially full throttle where Ferrari has been able to gain back most of their advantage.
Yeah.
Now, where I think Ferrari might lose a lot of time is the last part of the lap in Sector 3, because that's where it gets a little more technical.
Yeah, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Yeah.
Maybe even 11. You could count in that.
Yep, and definitely out of 14 and 15 where it's a low-speed corner. And Mercedes, they have the advantage in the low-speed and the medium-speed corners. In the high-speed corners, I think Ferrari's still a little bit down, but they can get back a little bit of that advantage. But essentially, Ferrari makes their money on the straights. They seem to have that significant engine power advantage like we saw in Canada. So if Vettel can bring the whole lap together like he did in Montreal, he could steal pole position. But there's certain areas of this track where I think Ferrari will be struggling a little bit more. And I think in particular the end of Sector 1 when we look at turns 3, 4, and 5 before the long straight. So again, it's kind of hard because Mercedes, their car is good at every track and they're good at every corner except the long straights, really.
No, they are, and it's kind of been classic Mercedes. That's the way it's been. So I think it'll be evened out very nice and should be on for a good race. Although every time we've said that, it's been Mercedes dominating. Yeah. So hopefully we have a good race. Let's just hope and pray.
I think so, and I think what you said in our recap in the previous episode, that it's going to be an anticipated race. Vettel's pissed off. Ferrari's maybe lit a fire under them after what happened.
Valtteri might be pissed off. He didn't have a good Canada.
Yeah, and he's a guy we haven't talked about. Yeah, he's like 30 points behind the championship. You know, all of a sudden, Hamilton's built this big gap over second and third place. It's 62 points ahead of Vettel. So Valtteri needs a really good weekend before this championship starts to slip away. And, I was saying in the beginning of the season, like, oh, no, Valtteri won't fall away. He'll be right up there. He's sort of had a little bit of a slump.
A blip, yeah.
But
call it a blip.
Yeah, but he's only won 2 races as well, which surprised me. Hamilton's won the rest of them. So I was like, oh, wow. He started the season off so well. And then it shows you how difficult it is, again, to keep up with Lewis Hamilton. But there's a lot of guys, I think, that really want to, and even, Charles Leclerc, too. He made his first Q3 last year at the circuit, so I think he can go well at this track as well. But
the F2 races here, too, this weekend, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Is the F3s here, too?
I'm not sure about the F3. F2, I know for sure. Let me just check, see if my internet will work here, but no, it will not.
Oh, good.
The one thing I do know is that Nicholas Latifi will be in FP1 session with Williams, and that actually correlates to the news that young drivers from now on will be able to earn super license points if they compete in practice sessions.
Oh, good.
for Formula One teams. So that's really good news. We've seen in the past years a lot of these young drivers like Latifi, Norris last year were getting a lot of sessions. So to be able to earn your super license points at the same time is good. You need around 40, I think it is, able to qualify. And there's a lot of other specifications to earn that super license to drive in Formula One. So that's good for the young drivers. But yeah, like having the F2 races there will help rubber the track in a little bit with the new asphalt.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same Pirelli tires pretty much.
Yeah.
Not the exact same, but
yeah, a little
at
bit
least
different.
it's still Pirelli.
Yeah.
You don't have Michelin's, like we saw in Canada, Michelin or Bridgestone, whoever it was, in the Porsche series, different sort of tires.
Yeah, exactly. And what else in terms of, I think that was it really in terms of the other news that we have. We do have the F2 races, so that championship is really close, 1 point gap now at the top of that championship, so that should be exciting. We'll be doing that little race recap after the race finishes, but I guess we can get into race predictions now. We haven't really got many of them. Oh, actually, we got Canada right for the most part.
Well, I think I went with Mercedes 1-2 because every time I've predicted a Mercedes 1-2. They haven't done it, and every time I don't predict a Mercedes 1-2, they've gone into 1-2. So I will not be predicting a Mercedes 1-2.
Okay.
Or sorry, I will be predicting.
Oh, you will be. Okay.
Yeah. So hopefully we don't have one. And I'm going to go Valtteri Bottas will win the race. Lewis Hamilton second, and in third place will be Charles Leclerc.
Okay. And as usual, kind of X Factor or other teams to look out for?
Renault, I think, is the obvious choice because of their engine upgrade. I'm just so curious to see, and maybe it's just not Renault to focus on. I think it's the battle between Red Bull and Renault and see what the pace matchup is between those two. A lot of pressure on Renault, and obviously it's a huge race for them. So I think a lot of eyes are going to be on them, and those eyes will include mine.
Okay. I'm gonna go with, I'll say I'm gonna go with Sebastian Vettel in P1.
Whoa.
And I'll go with that because he really wants to win after what happened in Canada. I really hope that the whole right to review whole thing wasn't a distraction for Ferrari. I think Vettel's going to be on it. He's been on it the last couple races, and Canada especially. Coming out ahead of Lewis Hamilton in qualifying and also having a really good race up until that point. Again, minus the mistake. I get it. He did make another mistake. How he made that mistake, whether Hamilton forced him into it, whether it was the dirty air, I mean, we'll never know. But I think that he's been really good this season. The car has not been good, unfortunately, but I think that he's on for his first race win. If it doesn't happen here, I think it's coming in the next 2 to 3 races. So I'll go with Vettel in P1. I'll go Hamilton in P2 and Valtteri P3. And I think Leclerc will be around there in P4 for Ferrari. And yeah, I would agree. I think I'm looking out for Renault again to score a double points finish. If they can stay clean in the first lap, I think from P5 downward in the grid, it's going to be crazy going into turn 1. Because when you look at turn 1, the tricky thing is the line, I mean, turn 1 is barely turn 1 because it already goes in leading into turn 2.
Yeah.
And it's super tight there as well. And the thing is that if you get pushed too much to the outside of turn 1, you're already there. You're not setting yourself up properly for the line going into turn 2.
You're cutting the quarter in turn 2.
Correct. In lap 1, I guess it's okay because the stewards are just going to say it's lap 1, and if you cut the corner, you're all right.
Yeah, hand your position back, whatever, and
yeah, exactly.
Keep going.
But I mean, in terms of qualifying, turn 1 is critical to get it right, and I think you got to really attack turn 1, the curb early, in order to get as wide as you can to be able to cut inside to turn 2. Because again, track limits is so important at this circuit, and I think the stewards are going to have their hands full looking at track limits again, especially after Canada as well. So I hope that we won't really have an issue in terms of, like, let's say we have another similar incident to Hamilton Vettel. I hope the stewards won't play another major role in this race.
I hope not. You never want
fear the pressure again. So I'm looking out for Renault. I think also McLaren too. I think that McLaren has quietly had a really good season. They're still 4th in the Constructors' Championship, and I think that they could potentially sneak out a double points finish, whether 9th or 10th, getting those final points finishes. And also, I'm going to be looking out for Lance Stroll.
I had one more driver to look out for too as well.
Yeah, those three teams, kind of 3 drivers to look out for. I think just coming off of such a good weekend, and he struggled at this track last season, But I think that Canada was a really positive step forward for him and showed a lot of people what his talent is and what he can do. But now, again, Q1 is another important one to look out for. What is that, 10 or 11?
11
Q1?
I think it's 11.
11 in a row now. So Q1 is the first major step for him this weekend. Because, again, I mean, when you look at what he's done starting from the back of the grid, what could he do starting from 9th or 10th, maybe even higher?
Like, let's start with 14th and 13th.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, maybe I'm a bit too ambitious.
I want to look out for Danny Kvyat as well. He had a stonker of a race in Canada. Some fantastic overtakes, great moves, and he's been great all season in that Toro Rosso. I would look for him in this race as well because he's entertaining to watch. He's so much fun to watch race. He's just aggressive. He's kind of like Magnussen. Just aggressive, and I love those type of racers.
Yeah. It's funny. I had a dream last night that Kevin Magnussen got in a fight with some driver at a race. And I was there at the race.
Oh, cool.
But I think it was a track in Toronto. It wasn't even like Montreal. It was like a street track. Oh. But yeah, that's what I remember. You just
Singapore, maybe.
I don't know. It would have been nice, but
that would be nice.
Yeah, he got in a fight with another driver, so
I wouldn't put it past him.
Maybe it's foreshadowing. I would put it past him.
Verstappen and Magnussen going at each other.
Ooh, that would be good.
That'd be good.
That'd
be a fist fight.
Well, there's another team that we kind of didn't cover much, Haas, right? Just how much they've struggled.
They've struggled right now, and hopefully they can come back and rebound off their poor performances. Kind of had a tough race in Canada where they should have excelled.
Yeah.
And they didn't. So you're looking for them to rebound in France. And
Red Bull too. I mean, Canada was always kind of a struggle for them.
Yeah.
But with the exception of Monaco, where they could have had a better finish, but they're another team that sort of haven't lived up to their own expectations this season because they haven't been challenging at the front. I read a great article from Will Buxton and kind of referencing to what we were talking about Max Verstappen being the best driver since Monaco 2018 last year.
Yeah.
So he's another guy that hasn't had a race victory yet this season. I think his highest was third on the podium.
Yeah.
I don't think he got higher than third this year.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So we'll see what Red Bull can do. And Pierre Gasly, home race as well.
That's true.
Home race for a handful
Grosjean.
of French drivers. Grosjean.
Ocon.
Charles Leclerc, kind of a home race, south of France.
Technically no, but
yeah,
kind of. It's like Max Verstappen in Belgium. It's like, it's kind of a home Grand Prix, but not at the same time.
Although that's technically his home Grand Prix because he was born in Belgium.
He was born in Belgium, but
so
give or take, whatever.
Yeah.
Ocon's home Grand Prix. Maybe he'll have a good test session.
I haven't seen him in the car this year.
I don't think he's testing.
Yeah.
But poor guy.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with him, but I think that about does it for our preview of the French Grand Prix. Do you think we missed anything? It's always something.
We covered everything.
Yeah,
but maybe we'll hear something we forgot about in the comments below. Let us know your race predictions. Who do you think who's your top 3 finishers and your X factor to watch out for? Let us know.
Yeah, and also, we're looking at, with the summer break coming up, we might be looking at doing some sort of different content or different sort of segment ideas. So
come on, what do you want to see on this channel? You want to see some, because I think the F1 2019 will be coming out around then.
I think next week.
Is it next week?
I think it's the 25th or 26th.
So let us know if you want to see some of that content, because I absolutely love the idea of the game.
I think it's great.
I think it's going to be fantastic. So maybe Chris and I can do our own career modes, and you can kind of keep up with us on that. Just disregard our horrible driving.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a wheel.
Oh, yeah, you got to get on that. Yeah. I'm currently testing the beta of F1 2019, and I must say I'm impressed, and I think this is the closest they've got to a simulation rather than a video game. There's a few things here and there, and I think a lot of people will have their own opinions about the game. You can't please everybody because, people have different sort of preferences and likes and dislikes. But I think that so far it's the best game that they've done. So hopefully the finished original game will be as good and hopefully better. We'll maybe do a couple of videos on that. But any ideas that you have, something that you'd like to see, just drop it in the comments, and we'll be brainstorming some things to go forward. Because we got to make this season exciting. If Mercedes are going to run away with it, then we got to have some fun.
Last season was exciting.
Yeah.
Got to have a good season this season.
Yeah, guys, we didn't really complain that much about F1 last season because it was exciting.
It was awesome. Great.
It was wheel-to-wheel racing, different teams winning different races. It was fun.
Yeah.
Can we go back, please?
We should just disqualify Mercedes.
Yeah. No,
No, we obviously not.
we'll keep him in there for now. But another year though, we might have.
We
to.
might have to in
We might have to.
2021.
Yeah, exactly. But that will do it for us. We'll be back to recap the French Grand Prix, and it's actually the first back-to-back weekend as well of the season.
That's right.
Austria's following
Austria's
this
next week.
Shaker should be back with us for that. I'm not sure if he'll be back for our recap podcast, but probably for our
preview.
Yeah, but that'll be sort of a quick turnaround in first back-to-back of the season. It's a little bit of a sprint to the finish before the summer break, so it's going to be nice and condensed in the next couple weeks. F1 Fantasy, we'll update that on our social media. I'll have to check if that was put out from last week, but we'll have to post that again. Make sure you get that in within the next couple of days. And yeah, I think that's about it.
I think so too.
Good. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody for listeing and tuning in. And make sure you stay.
And your comments. We do appreciate the comments. We
even
love
the
them.
negative ones. We appreciate them.
We love them.
We have fun reading them. And as usual, follow us on all of our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as well. And subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and you'll be able to stay up to date with all of our podcasts. And just a quick shout out to our very own Toronto Raptors.
That's right,
for
NBA
winning
champions.
The 2019 NBA championship. I don't know if they won it since the last time that we did the podcast or not. Can't remember, but they got it done. First ever championship for the Raptors. So congratulations to the entire team and all the players as well. And Kawhi stays in 2020. 2020. That's my opinion. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you for our recap.